And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast, your premier podcast covering all things Oregon football and Oregon football recruiting. Just in case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network, coming to you live on a Friday. It is Friday, September 1st, 2023, coming to you live at a couple of different spots. We're here on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. We are also over on the Ducks Digest Facebook page and on Twitter at mtorres sports. So wherever you guys are watching, thank you so much for tuning in, taking some time out of your day to talk some ball with me. It's going to be a fun one. We are doing our Oregon football / recruiting Friday mailbag episode of the podcast, trying to make these a weekly thing. We're going 5 days a week on the podcast now. So if you're not subscribed here on YouTube or on your podcasting platform of choice, you definitely want to go ahead and do that and hit the notification bell if you're here on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of those uploads. So, like I said, it is a mailbag episode, so want to be answering your guys' questions, letting you guys guide today's episode of the podcast. As I always tell you, I put out a call to action on Twitter to get your guys' questions at mtorres sports, so I'm going to be prioritizing those questions first, and then if you guys have a question, go ahead and follow Bud's example here in the live chat in the comments and throw a question my way. It can be about Oregon recruiting or Oregon football, heck, even college football too. College football is really it's underway now, right? We had week 1 last night, had some games. We had Minnesota and Nebraska. We had Utah and Florida. We had Arizona State played. So there's a lot of football going right now. So it's a very, very fun time without a doubt. Wanted to start today's episode of the pod on a little bit of a different note, but I don't want to take too much time to say it. So if you guys have been watching me, reading me, listening to my stuff for a while now, you know that I now live in beautiful Long Beach, California. Took a risk, took a gamble on myself, and chose to move from Eugene to Southern California a year ago. And now I have a whole season under my belt covering the Ducks remotely and covering high school football. So just with Oregon kicking off their 2023 season tomorrow on Saturday, I wanted to let you guys know about a little bit of change in my coverage this year. Kind of right now, my plan is to really go all in on high school football, on recruiting, especially covering Oregon. Of course, that's really where my passion lies, and that makes the most sense for me living in a talent hotbed like Southern California. Got to cover a game last night out in the Inland Empire, Rancho Cucamonga against Norco. That was a super fun game. Rancho Cucamonga has a very strong connection to Oregon with former Ducks Thomas Graham, Sean Dollars, Jalen Red. They all went there. Patrick Chung went there. So that was a super fun experience. You can go check out my Twitter for my latest coverage of that and kind of some pictures and highlights from that game. But back to my point, I think really I learned a pretty big lesson last year, just how important it is to have that healthy work-life balance. It's certainly a very tough balance to strike. But that being said, I am really trying to go all in and put most of my focus into high school football and Oregon football recruiting. That doesn't mean I'm going to be without Oregon football coverage by any means. I'm still going to talk about it all the time here on the podcast. I have a photographer that's going to be going to the games, and I'll be sharing that. And then I'll be covering the team on a higher level from the day-to-day news stories during the week. So I know that people kind of know me for Oregon recruiting coverage, so I'm really trying to lean into that. And I just wanted to let you guys know. So if you guys are rocking with me still, I would greatly appreciate it. And, the Oregon football coverage isn't going away by any means. It's just going to be a little bit of a different look on the weekends. Still hoping to get up to Eugene for a game this season. Not exactly sure which one that's going to be just yet. But super stoked for the season. I will be at Long Beach Poly versus Mission Viejo tonight at Long Beach City College. Why is that an important game if you're looking for an Oregon angle? Well, Oregon linebacker commit Dylan Williams will be playing in that game, and the Jackrabbits are looking to bounce back in a big way after getting pummeled by Bishop Gorman last week in Beaverton at the Nike Kickoff Classic. But we know that Bishop Gorman is a heck of a team, so pretty hard for any school, any team to really hang with those guys, national powerhouse. But I'll be there on the ground. Dylan Williams, 2024 Oregon linebacker commit. So if you want some coverage of him, you know what you got to do. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at mtorresports. So that being said, let's go ahead and get to our first mailbag question in today's episode. So our first question comes from Go Big Green on Twitter. I was a little bit unclear about his question, but I'm going to do the best I can to answer it. Question is, we finished the 22 class strong flipping, or 23 class strong flipping several players and closing big on Mateo. We've missed on a few, and it's been really quiet. Does your gut say Lanning has another something up his sleeve, or is this staff content with what they have, shifting focus to 23? So I think with the way this question was asked, it was probably asking finishing the 23 class strong and maybe shifting to 2024 on the recruiting trail, or maybe even 2025. So I'll do my best to answer this one. Tried to clarify things in the comments there, as you can see. But as far as my gut, what my gut's saying, I think Dan Lanning does have something up his sleeve. I think that it's been quiet for a reason. I know that Oregon did have some misses this summer, most notably Elijah Rushing out of Arizona. That was definitely a tough one for sure. And then Colin Simmons ended up going to Texas. I didn't really think Oregon was a massive threat there. But they did have some success, right? They did flip Dakota Fields from the USC Trojans. That was huge. And Oregon is still in it for a number of really highly touted guys. You got 2024 four-star Yelm linebacker Braden Platt, who's going to be announcing his college commitment between Oregon and Oklahoma on Monday, Labor Day at 5:30 p.m. Pacific on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. We'll be covering that decision as well over on Ducks Digest and all of my social media platforms. And then you also have a couple of other guys that Oregon's still going after. 2024 Seattle Washington O'Day running back Jason Brown Jr. I put my prediction in for him, and I think Oregon's in a really good spot there, battling the likes of Michigan State and Washington. I think for that, it might come down to what Oregon wants to do at the running back spot, seeing that they already have one commitment in Dejon Riggs. Do they want another high school guy, or do they maybe hold off and check out their options in the transfer portal? Those are two guys. You also have to talk about the modern day Monarchs, one of the best teams, probably the best team in the entire country right now, out here in my neck of the woods in Southern California, Orange County, Santa Ana. They still have a couple of really big players that are uncommitted on their team here in the 2024 recruiting class. We're talking about Aiden Breland, five-star defensive lineman in the trenches. And you also have Brandon Baker, five-star offensive tackle here in the 2024 class. I know that there is a question about him later in the show, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about Aiden Breland a little bit. I think things have been pretty quiet on the Aiden Breland front lately, and for good reason. He's kind of flying under the radar a little bit. Hasn't been a guy that does a ton of interviews, which is why it was important for me to go to that week 1 game against Corona Centennial and get an interview with him. He said he's going to be chopping down his list of finalists to, I believe, 4 schools. So that leads me to believe that a decision is not far off. When I spoke to him back in the spring, he was talking about making his college commitment later in the summer or early in the season. So that means a decision is probably not too far off. I think Oregon's in the mix there. You have Georgia, Texas A&M, and Miami as well. And Oregon might be a quiet leader in that recruitment. Breland has been wearing the Georgia headband, but he was quick to tell reporters that it's not that big of a deal. It was just a red that matched his uniforms. But I definitely think that Georgia is probably Oregon's main competition in that recruitment for Aiden Breland. And I think Aiden Breland, you could easily make the argument that he is the biggest target that Oregon still has on their board here in the 2024 recruiting class. Already have a couple of really solid commitments along the defensive line in Zadavian Sims out of Oklahoma and Tion Gray out of the state of Missouri. And then you also have Jackson Jones out of Yuma Catholic, a super athletic edge rusher in the state of Arizona, if you want to lump him in there with the defensive lineman as well. So I like the way that the haul is looking right now, but I think Aiden Breland might be that trick that Dan Lanning has up his sleeve. I think that that's a guy Oregon's been on for a very long time, and they are really more of a contender than I think most people are giving them credit for on the national scene. You have that body type that you don't see out west very often, and you have to make sure that you prioritize him. Also looking at guys like Jericho Johnson, 2024 defensive lineman, 6'4", 300 pounds out of Northern California. He is another guy that has Oregon among his top schools. So those are some of the guys you still have to keep an eye on. The other guy that comes to mind for me, you have Sione Laulea, one of the best junior college prospect in the 2024 class. Long, lengthy, speedy corner out of the College of San Mateo, 6'4", 195 pounds, or 190 pounds, maybe 185, 190, probably not 195. I have to double check, but those are some of the guys you have to keep an eye on, and maybe that those are some of the guys that Lanning has up his sleeve as things are kind of quiet right now on the recruiting front for Oregon. So I don't think the staff is content with what they have. I really like where they stand in this recruiting class from a numbers standpoint, from a quality standpoint, filling in those gaps on the depth chart and addressing your needs and maybe some positions of concern. So really like where they're at right now. I think they still have some work to do on the defensive line and maybe at wide receiver as well and running back. So those are some positions that you still want to keep an eye out for if you're an Oregon fan following the Ducks on the recruiting trail here in the 2024 class. We got some folks here in the comments. We got Bud here. He's an everydayer. What's going on, Bud? Thank you so much for tuning in. He said, "Go Ducks, mañana." Oregon kicks off the 2023 season against the Portland State Vikings at 12:07. I believe is the updated time, 12:07 on Pac-12 Network at Autzen Stadium. So that is going to be a fun one. Got a couple of questions about Utah that I'll try to get to after I get to these questions. We got Up the Sco who's here, says, "Yes, let's go." Steezy PDX is here. We got P-Town Made saying yo. And then we got David Barnes here. Says go Ducks. And we got my guy Mark here with an endorsement of the channel. Show some love and like the video. He knows what's going on. Appreciate you, Mark. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you guys can hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel, always appreciate it. And I love it when you like it. So we'll get to some other questions. I'll go ahead and star some of these so that I can get back to them. And then we'll go from there. So we have our next question here on the podcast. We have a question from Kayla. Kayla or Kala 84745 asking, is there a recruit that Oregon is targeting that may be flying under the radar, so to speak, because of lack of national exposure, stars, etc.? Everyone focuses on the highly ranked players, and rightfully so, but anyone we should know of. And look, they even use the hashtag DucksDish. We absolutely love that. So as far as just kind of under the radar kind of players, I do think there is one that is worth a mention here in the 2024 class, maybe even two. I'm going to talk about Roger Saliapaga. He is a tight end / wide receiver out of Orem High School out in the state of Utah, a state that Oregon has really been prioritizing here in recent recruiting cycles. Utah has brought them guys like Jackson Powers Johnson, Jeffrey Bassa in recent years, obviously the Sewell brothers. So I'm really intrigued about the state of Utah moving forward. What do we know about Roger Saliapaga? Well, he has taken multiple visits to Oregon, and there are a lot of big-time schools that are coming after this guy. He has 22 reported scholarship offers according to his 24/7 sports recruiting profile. He did recently, I want to say, trim things down. But let me see. Yeah, he posted a top 10 on July 28th. That's my birthday. Shout out. So it looks like a pretty interesting recruitment here. You have Oregon and Utah, along with the likes of Washington, Tennessee, Baylor, UCLA, Miami, Iowa, Auburn, and Alabama. And then also got a couple of recent offers here just on the heels of the start of the season. Texas A&M hopped in the fold for Roger Saliapaga, and so did Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. So Roger Saliapaga is a guy that I would consider someone who's kind of flying under the radar for Oregon here in the 2024 recruiting class for a couple of reasons. I think that Oregon's class has some really good balance. 22 verbal commitments, good for the number 13 class in the entire country. But tight end is an interesting spot because they have 3 commitments from tight ends here in the 24 class. You have the headliner of the group in North Medford's AJ Pugliano. He's a 3-star guy, 6'3.5", 220 pounds. You have Jackson Ford out of the Lone Star State at Melissa, Texas. And then you also have Cade Catton out of Manville, Texas, 6'5.5", 250 pounds. He's a 3-star recruit according to 247 Sports. And he kind of caught me off guard. I had heard that Oregon wasn't quite done at tight end earlier on in this cycle before his commitment. But that one definitely caught me off guard because I'll be honest, I had no idea who he was. So the tight end spot, you have 3 tight ends in the fold right now in 2024, which is has to be a good thing if you're an Oregon fan because tight end depth is a little bit shaky heading into the season opener against Portland State. You got Terrence Ferguson, you got Casey Kelly, Patrick Herbert, Kenyon Sadiq, Caden Ludwig, but not a lot of proven production there outside of those first 2 guys in Patrick Herbert and Terrence Ferguson. So I like that Oregon's still prioritizing tight end. And I think Saliapaga is an interesting guy here because he is a little bit, I don't want to say undersized, but 6'4", 195 pounds. Maybe he is a little bit more of a hybrid tight end wide receiver kind of guy. And the wide receiver position has been a little bit of a work in progress for Oregon here in the 2024 recruiting class. You got Jordan Anderson committed out of Southern California. All 3 receivers are actually out of Southern California. You have Jordan Anderson, who's the highest rated of the bunch. You have Jack Ressler from Mater Dei, and then you also have Dylan Gresham from San Jacinto. So I think that Oregon would probably like to add another wide receiver if they can, and maybe Roger Saliapaga is someone that kind of flies under the radar and that they're able to tap into that Utah pipeline, tap into that Orem pipeline, the Orem High School pipeline. That's where Noah Sewell went, to add another intriguing player here in the 2024 recruiting class. Another guy that might be worth a mention here, but is a little bit higher rated, is Solomon Williams. Who is Solomon Williams? Well, he is an edge rusher that Oregon is heavily recruiting out of Carrollwood Day High School in Tampa, Florida. 46 reported scholarship offers. That has helped him garner 4-star status on the 247 Sports composite. He's a top 300 player nationally, the number 21 edge rusher, and the number 42 player in the state of Florida. Oregon's been pretty active in the state of Florida lately, especially in the 2025 recruiting class. I'm talking about guys like wide receiver Dallas Wilson, also out of the Tampa area, who recently earned 5-star status as the headliner in Oregon's recruiting class that just has 4 guys right now. And then you also have Chavez Sandman Thompson out of UGally in the Melbourne, Florida area. So great question. Love talking about those under the radar guys. And we're going to go ahead and get to our next one. Let's see what we got here. This question comes from Jev on Twitter. Thanks for the question. Question is, what are some safeties Oregon is looking at in the 2025 class and any sleeper picks at any position? So this is a fun one. Looking at what Oregon's doing in the 2025 class at safety, I think it's definitely a position that they need to prioritize. Safety play hasn't been too great as far as recent play at Oregon, but they do have a couple of talented safeties in the fold. And Aaron Flowers out of Texas, he's a 2024 guy. And then you also have Kingston Lopa. He's a really big safety that is actually being viewed as a linebacker in some instances, but I think 247 has him. 247 has him as a linebacker at 6'5", 190 pounds. But I've seen him as a safety. So let's turn the page and look at the 2025 guys that Oregon is going after here early on in the 2025 cycle. I think one guy, when you're looking at any position and just kind of starting to see where will Oregon maybe go at any given position in a certain cycle, I think that you have to look at the West Coast. That's where Oregon is. That's where their bread and butter is. That's where they have those pipeline states, specifically the Golden State, California. I think the safety that you have to keep an eye out for that Oregon is heavily recruiting is Jaden Hudson out of Pittsburgh, California, Pittsburgh High School. That's where Jaden Rashada went to high school. He, of course, is now Arizona State's starting quarterback, and he got his first college win last night over, I believe it was Southern Utah. It made me think of my good buddy Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On Ducks. He does some great play-by-play stuff for Southern Utah. So shout out to Spencer. You guys know that we do a lot of good work together. But Jaden Hudson, what do we need to know about him? He's a 6'2", 175-pound safety, and he's one of the best in the country in the secondary, rated a 4-star on the 247 Sports Composite, 0.9689, number 66 player in the country, number 7 safety, and the number 8 prospect in California, which is always loaded, 27 reported scholarship offers, and he recently announced a top 10 on Friday. Top 10 schools for Jaden Hudson are as follows. Of course, Oregon, and then you have a lot of big-time schools: Georgia, LSU, Penn State, Miami, Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, and Washington. So why might Oregon have a good chance here? The first thing that comes to mind for me is not only what can Chris Hampton do in his first year working with the safeties at Oregon, coming over from Tulane, what can he do to make some noise for Oregon on the recruiting trail at the safety spot? But there is one member of Oregon's recruiting staff, one member of Oregon football's overall staff, but a lot of people know him for his ability as a recruiter. I'm talking about defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi. Tosh Lupoi is originally from the East Bay area in Northern California. He played at De La Salle in Concord. Definitely a storied program. So he has a lot of ties to the East Bay, which makes me think that Oregon is going to obviously emerge here as they have, landing in his top schools, but stay a main contender for Jaden Hudson here in the 2025 recruiting class. So he's someone that you definitely need to keep your eye on. A couple of other names come to mind in the 2025 class at safety. Some of them are a little bit farther east, so those are going to be hard guys to ultimately land in the long run. Excuse me. Let's look at Anquan Figgins. Anquan Figgins is a 4-star safety out of Thompson High School in Alabaster, Alabama. And he made a decision recently to back off his verbal commitment to Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans, which was an interesting development because Anquan Figgins' brother, I don't remember it off the top of my head. Let's see. Traquan Figgins, he actually transferred to USC over the offseason from Alabama. And he was also from Thompson High School in Alabaster. So we'll see if he makes some noise, but I know that USC looked like they were trying to tap into that brother connection. Anquan Figgins is a name to watch for Oregon here at safety, and you might think it's an unrealistic target because he's from the South in the Southeastern Conference blueprint of college football, but Oregon has made some noise in Alabama recently. Look no farther than the 2024 recruiting class in Jaquan McRoy, massive offensive tackle out of Pinson, Alabama, Clay Chalkville High School. So might be a bit of a reach, but I think he is a name worth knowing and watching. And then I have one more name for you at safety for the Ducks in 2025, and that is Sael Reyes. Sael Reyes is a safety out of DeSoto High School, out in the Lone Star State, the state of Texas. He is actually unrated on 247, but he has 25 scholarship offers. So he's definitely someone that a lot of college coaches think is going to be playing some big time football on Saturdays. But he's a name to watch because I think not only does Oregon have a lot of connections in the state of Texas, but Oregon has done some work at DeSoto before, and he's definitely not the only DeSoto player that they're recruiting. So I don't know a whole lot about Sael Reyes, but I think he's definitely someone that is worth watching. One other quick note that just comes to mind. I'm seeing we're still getting some mailbag questions, but if you guys wanted to push your question to the top of the list, you can do that by using the super chat function. If you want to support the channel, I think that's just in the bottom right of the live chat. But just wanted to put that out there. I want to get to your guys' questions, but we have a lot of them. So let's see what else we got here. The second part of this question was any sleeper picks, any position. If we're looking at the 25 class, I think two kind of come to mind. One of them, I don't know if it's too much of a sleeper, but I did my best. We're looking at 2025 Duncanville, Texas wide receiver DeCorian Moore. He recently announced his verbal commitment to Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers out in the boot in Baton Rouge, but Oregon's going to stay involved on that one. Talking to a source in Eugene, I know that DeCorian Moore is a major priority for the Ducks at wide receiver this cycle. They already have Dallas Wilson, Adrian Wilson also in the fold. He's out of Pflugerville, Texas, Weiss High School. They would love to go back into Texas to get the state's top wide receiver in DeCorian Moore. And there's been strong mutual interest between DeCorian Moore and the Ducks previously, before he made his commitment to the LSU Tigers. He made multiple trips out to Eugene. This was when the Ducks were still involved with Colin Simmons. So I say he's kind of a sleeper pick just because I know that he is not someone that Oregon is going to – he is somebody that Oregon is not going to stop recruiting. Another sleeper pick, if you want to call it, this isn't a prediction, want to be clear about that, but Cooper Perry. He's a 2025 wide receiver out of Notre Dame Prep in Scottsdale, Arizona. I actually brought him on a recent episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. So he is someone that has high interest in Oregon and I think is a realistic option for the Ducks as a 4-star wide receiver out of the state of Arizona out there in Scottsdale. Oregon has a lot of ties to that state. They've been prioritizing it. Ty Thompson, Kyler Casper, Mikael Gardner, Amari Washington, all of those guys come from the state of Arizona. So Oregon is well aware of the talent in that state, and I fully expect them to go back to Arizona in 2025. All right, let's see. I'm going to get my next question up here and then take a little sip of water. All right, here we go. Next question on today's mailbag episode comes from Aaron Martinez. Thanks for the question, Aaron. Aaron asks, are we losing ground to Texas for Brandon Baker? If so, do you think the staff can get Baker back in Eugene for an OV to sway the momentum back to us? And would you look at that? Another great follower and listener, viewer, dropping the hashtag DucksDish. Love to see that. I didn't even ask you guys to do that, and you did it. So appreciate you for that one. Brandon Baker. What do we know about Brandon Baker? He is constantly circling in the discussion around Oregon football and Oregon football recruiting here in the state, in the class of 24. So I talked to Brandon Baker. Earlier on this season after that win over Corona Centennial. And honestly, I just got to keep it real with you guys. I'm not moving on my Oregon prediction. I'm not doing that right now. I think we have to see kind of what transpires down the line here. But I've talked to him, I want to say at least 5 times since I moved down to Southern California. And that interview with Baker was the first that I'd had where I feel like he wasn't super, super solid and obviously towards Oregon. And I'm going to tell you why. We have another trip coming up to Nebraska next month. Give me just a second. I got to plug in my laptop here. Can't be dying midstream. But Baker's going to be taking an official visit out to Lincoln on September 16th to see the Cornhuskers in action. And Texas is another school that has really emerged as a heavy contender in the recruitment of Brandon Baker, the nation's #1 offensive tackle. So I'm not saying that I think Brandon Baker is trending away from Oregon necessarily. I'm just saying that I think we're really seeing Oregon maybe not be the clear-cut favorite right now. So like I said, I'm not changing my prediction right now. I still have that prediction on Oregon for Brandon Baker, but you have Texas involved, Nebraska is involved, Ohio State is also involved, and he told me he was hearing from Tennessee as well in this recruitment. When might it come to an end? Not completely sure just yet. But he did say that he was going to be trying to kind of wrap things up, I want to say in about 3 weeks or so, which is an interesting development because when I talked to him back in the winter and spring, he told me that he was pretty set, pretty set on making his decision during the early signing period in December. So while I don't think Oregon is losing ground to Texas, I feel like Texas is maybe evening the playing field a little bit, but an official visit to Eugene, I think I see it as something that is very possible, but I don't know right now if I would say it's probable ahead of a commitment for Brandon Baker. Now, keep in mind here, he hasn't set a commitment date. So once we have that commitment date, then we can kind of see, okay, how does the calendar set up? What do the games look like for Oregon and for him? Fortunately, this is an elite guy that Oregon has geography working on their side for in this recruitment. So that's something that obviously really helps the Ducks here. But he's been to Oregon so much on all these unofficial visits. I think that there maybe isn't that much of a need. If I'm Brandon Baker, do I need to see Oregon in an official visit capacity? Because I've been to it so much. I'm so familiar with it. But I think if they can get him back on campus for an OV, that is definitely a step in the right direction. He had told me after that game against Corona Centennial that he was still hearing from Malik Terry every day, and he still has some solid interest in the Ducks. But Texas and Nebraska, in my opinion, are still serious contenders, as is Ohio State. All right, we're still rolling here on the Ducks Dish podcast on a Friday afternoon. Appreciate you guys rocking with me here on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Quick reminder, you guys got to do me a favor. I don't want to say it too many times, but hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow this community, and I love the support that I'm seeing from you guys doing all of these live streams, doing the uploads and the podcast and everything. So appreciate you all greatly. Next question for us on today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast comes from Bryce McDonald, and Bryce has an interesting one, folks. Bryce asks, what do you think it'll take for Oregon to get up to the top level of recruiting with Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU consistently being top 6? Is that even possible? #DucksDish. So this is an interesting question, and it's one that I've been pondering quite a bit. I've been saying for the longest time, it feels like that Oregon needs to get to that top 5 territory on a consistent basis if they want to win their first national title. And as far as getting there, that's a tough one. I think that you need to win some of these near miss recruiting battles. I don't want to say these ones in particular, but recruiting battles like Justin Williams, 5-star linebacker out of the state of Texas. That one came down to Georgia and Oregon. If Oregon can win more of those battles, Nate Frazier, you had Oregon, Georgia, A&M, and Alabama in the mix there. If you can win recruiting battles like Nate Frazier and Justin Williams, and if you can get a guy like an Elijah Rushing, I don't think that Elijah Rushing, that one's an interesting recruitment. I don't think that decision choosing to go to Arizona was for any fault of Oregon's. I think Oregon did everything they possibly could have in that recruitment. and Arizona just came in at the 11th hour, really shaking things up. They had stayed on him, but you can kind of read between the lines of what I'm saying. It was Oregon, and then Arizona came in at the last minute. So if you can get some of those 5 stars is obviously a great place to start, but winning some of those just near miss recruiting battles, I think that kind of helps set you in the right direction. I think you need to continue to bring in elite talent at the premium positions. So you're talking quarterback, you're talking running back, you're talking wide receiver, you're talking cornerback. And I also think defensive line is absolutely a premium position for Oregon. So doing all those things takes a tremendous amount of work, but how do you ultimately get there? I think the easiest thing you can do right now is win. It's like Al Davis said, just win, baby. I'm not a Raider fan at all. I know a decent amount of Raider fans. I'm a Niner fan. And now there's that connection now that Jimmy G is over there in Vegas. But if Oregon can just take care of business on the field, get back to the Pac-12 title game, win the Pac-12 title game, get to a New Year's Six bowl or the playoff, win a New Year's Six bowl or a game in the playoff. Winning, even in the era of name, image, and likeness today, winning is still your best recruiting tool. So that is what I think Oregon needs to do to try to level out the playing field and get into that conversation with teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. And I think you also have to continue pushing the envelope, continue expanding your reach on the recruiting trail. We already know Oregon is a national brand. You know about Oregon, and whether you're on the West Coast, the East Coast, the Midwest, the South, wherever it is. Bo Nix's billboards, the bodacious pop-ups and ads that you're seeing, that's just another example of Oregon's national brand. So if Oregon can continue pushing that national brand, continue pushing their reach, getting out into the South, getting out into the DMV, which they're already doing here in the 2024 recruiting class with Michael Van Buren and Ife Obadegwu and Dejon Riggs. Side note, I'm going to go see Michael Van Buren and Ife Obadegwu next week when the St. Francis Academy Panthers, I think is their mascot, travel out west, out here to Southern California to play the St. John Bosco Braves on a Friday night. That's going to be a heck of a matchup, and I'm going to be there because I'm not usually able to see those guys. Mater Dei plays St. Francis tonight all the way across the country, but I didn't have the budget to go travel for that one, so I'm going to catch them next week. But if Oregon is able to continue doing some of those things, I think that's how you close in on the Alabamas, the Ohio States, and the Georgias. You need to win some of those near-miss recruiting battles. You need some of those to break your way. You need to keep pushing to get guys anywhere in the country. Keep pushing into Florida, too. I think that's going to go a long way. Those are hard recruiting battles to win, but I think that's what you got to do. Having myself a little bit of a hair day here. And just keep winning. If you keep winning and you have great staff, great coaches, great players, then that's one of the big things that you do. That's how you help take that next step. All right, we got a couple more here. What else do we have? This is an interesting one. This one comes from Maximizing Profit, and it's a question that I bet a lot of people have thought about at one time or another. The question is, what happens to the guys that enter the portal and don't land, i.e. Trajan Williams, Jaden Navarrete, Jabril McNeil? These are some of the recent transfers that we've seen from Oregon. I think, honestly, probably there's one of 3 possibilities. I think one of them is you just got to keep grinding, keep chasing the dream, and just stay active. I think that's kind of what we saw Adrian Jackson do. I think he's going to UNR to play for Ken Wilson, but I don't believe he was playing anywhere, and he just kind of had to wait his turn and wait to get a call, wait to get a shot for a new place. Or you might end up going the junior college route. I think that that's something that is becoming more and more common, especially with guys that hit the portal and don't find a home. You go to a junior college. there's a couple of pretty big name junior college programs. You play your ball, you try to put your best foot forward and get your name out there. So I think that's something that you do. And then honestly, I can't confirm that it happened for any of these guys, but maybe you have to hang up the cleats. I think that that's maybe a sad reality that is happening a bit more often now in today's era of the transfer portal in college football. You put your name in the transfer portal after being out of school, and let's be honest here, none of these guys really did a whole lot. Maybe Jabril McNeil or Navarrete because they were at Oregon a little bit longer, but none of these guys did a whole lot at Oregon. So when you enter the transfer portal from a school like Oregon, maybe you're hoping that the name can kind of carry you into those conversations or put you on the radar of some of these coaches. So if I'm a coach at another school and I say, hey, this guy from Oregon is in the portal, I think, oh, great. Wow. A lot of really good players go to Oregon. What did he do while he was there? Oh, well, he never really saw the field too much, coach. We don't really know a whole lot about him, just his high school tape. If I'm a college coach and that's the kind of situation that is put in front of me, I would feel a lot less inclined to take a risk or take a commitment on a player like that, unless you have one of the reasons that guys out of the transfer portal are so attractive to these college coaches, such great options. They've played football, they've produced at their respective schools. So if you get a guy like one of these players in the question that hasn't really played a whole lot of ball, it just makes it kind of hard, I think, for some of these coaches to really make that move and take these commitments with any sort of confidence. So it's definitely a sad reality. I don't know how much is happening now, but that's an interesting question based on where the game is at today. All right, what else do we have? Do we have any more questions here before we get to the live chat? Let's see. I think we have one more question that was asked before the show, so let me see if I can get to it here. All right. I think it was a good one. Okay, here we go. This one, last mailbag question here, and then we'll get to the live chat for you guys that are watching along at home. Last question comes from Matthew Slaughter asking, we are really going to need a top tier tight end soon. Sadiq may be the one, but who are we in on if he is not? No disrespect, but I am not seeing one in this recruiting class. Yeah, so the tight end room, a little bit interesting right now. After this season, you probably aren't going to have any more Terrence Ferguson. I think he's probably going to be heading to the NFL draft as one of the better tight ends in the Pac-12 and on the West Coast. But Casey Kelly could come back for another year. The junior transfer from Ole Miss, 6'3", 245 pounds. We really don't know what he looks like or what he's going to be able to do for the Ducks because he just doesn't have a whole lot of tape from Ole Miss. He was primarily like a run blocking tight end. So if you take Terrence Ferguson out, maybe you have Patrick Herbert for another year. I know he's been at Oregon for a long time, but he's gotten super banged up. So I would imagine that he has a little bit of extra eligibility coupled with the COVID year. But other than that, Kenyon Sadiq looks like he's really intriguing coming out of the state of Idaho. He made a couple of plays in the spring game and has some good buzz in fall camp. But he is a little bit undersized. He needs to add some weight to his frame. And then you have Caden Ludwig, who comes over from Colorado, and I think he was a linebacker recruit. So we don't even know how comfortable he is at the position right now, and he is a pretty young guy. But like I said earlier on in this episode, Oregon does have 3 tight ends committed here in the 2024 class. I think the one that's the most recognizable from a recruiting ranking standpoint is AJ Pugliano, and he's an in-state 3-star out of North Medford. So I think he's a guy that you have to keep an eye on, and maybe he can exceed expectations. Jackson Ford out of Texas, 6'5", 230 pounds. He used to play quarterback before he started playing more tight end, also played defensive line. So he's super athletic, and I think that he's a guy Oregon fans could definitely see rise on the recruiting trail from a stock standpoint. And then you have Cade Caton, still need to figure out how to say his name, out of Manville, Texas, 6'5.5", 250 pounds. So he's an interesting guy that I want to learn a little bit more about that Oregon has committed here in the 2024 class. But There are some tight ends here. I don't think that Oregon maybe has that All-American, that guy that really pops off the page and catches your eye. But keep in mind, they could also look at the transfer portal after this season to see what kind of options pop up there. Or maybe one of these top 24 tight ends decommits, and then Oregon's able to get in the mix. You never know. So I agree, Oregon needs to kind of prioritize the tight end position and figure out where things stand there. But I think they still have some good options. And we can't write off these guys in the 2024 recruiting class until they get to campus. And not that I plan on writing them off, but we got to see what they got. That's all I'm saying. So appreciate the question, Matthew. All right. So now the moment you've all been waiting for, let's get to some of these questions in the live chat. If you guys have an additional question, throw it my way and I'll do my best to answer it. Probably going to be going for about another 15 minutes here on today's episode. We are on YouTube and still rolling. Also wanted to give you guys a heads up. I am going to be on Fox Sports Eugene tomorrow for their game day show. So as you guys know, I'm doing weekly recruiting hits over on Fox Sports Eugene. And I think that my portion is supposed to come on around 10:15 a.m. So if you find yourself listening to the radio, they are, according to their Twitter page, KORE 1050 AM 102.9 FM Eugene/Springfield. So keep an eye out for that. And then I'll also have my hit here on YouTube and on the Ducks Dish podcast. Super excited for that. And yeah, let's just keep it rolling. Bud with the question, thoughts on Utah football team after last night's game? Man, Kyle Whittingham is one hell of a coach. I feel like I've been saying that for a long, long time. I made the mistake of maybe not buying too into the Utah hype last year, but I am all in on Utah. I've been a big supporter of Utah this whole summer going into the season. They made Florida look terrible yesterday, and Florida was looking super sloppy. And the fact that they were able to get that win over an SEC team is great for the Pac-12. It's great for them. They didn't have Cam Rising, and they were able to get some of those backups like Nate Johnson involved. And Bryson Barnes had a really good play, that 70-yard touchdown on the first play of the game. Utah is for real. Utah is absolutely for real. I think we already knew that going into the season, but Cam Rising's injury makes it a little bit of a question mark. I think he tore his ACL in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, so we need to see when he's going to be able to return. But if they don't have Rising and they can get that kind of a game out of Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson, I think that they're going to be all right. They're always solid on defense, and they also have some new weapons like Micah Pittman on that offense. So I think they're going to be all right, and I think that they're going to go pretty far in the Pac-12. All right, another one from Bud that I had starred. Mailbag, which Duck recruits have announced commitment dates, and when are they? I think the only commitment date that we have right now is for 2024 Yelm Washington linebacker Braden Platt. He's going to be announcing his college decision on Monday, September 4th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. So make sure that you tune into that one. Nick P says, my prediction is Oregon has 2 Pac-12 losses, Utah and USC. I've been thinking about this question as well, just Oregon's record going into the year. I just did a prediction over on Spencer McLaughlin's show on Locked On Ducks, so go make sure you guys check that one out. And I think I said Oregon was only going to lose one game, and that one was to Washington on the road in Seattle, and I had them winning over Utah and USC. And I think the reason that I said that is because Oregon, people rarely win in Salt Lake City against the Utes. Oregon in particular hasn't beaten the Utes in Salt Lake City in Rice-Eccles Stadium since 2016 with Justin Herbert in that 4-8 season. So I think that I'm buying Oregon stock. I'm putting my confidence in Dan Lanning and Bo Nix that they're going to be able to get that team ready, get that team right, and they're going to be able to go into Utah and come away with a win. I think that is a huge opportunity for a statement. And then as for USC, I think that's going to be a tough game, no doubt about it. But again, putting my confidence in Dan Lanning and the Ducks, I think Oregon's going to have the better defense between those two teams. And with two really, really good quarterbacks, you could definitely make the argument that USC has the edge there with Caleb Williams. I think it's going to come down to who can get some stops. I think it's going to come down to who can get some takeaways in that game, Oregon against USC, and I'm giving Oregon the edge there. So those will be some fun games to watch for sure. Question from Wink. Question is, hey, Max, what do you think is the total number of players we take in this year's class? This is an interesting one because Oregon already has 22 players, and there's more guys that they want to add from the high school ranks. And there's going to be players that Oregon adds from the transfer portal. So that being said, what do they want to do from a numbers standpoint here in the 2024 recruiting class? Just knowing off the top of my head which guys they're still in on, which guys they have a chance for, and kind of where they want to address some needs still this cycle, I'm going to say maybe like 27 if we're just looking at the high school guys. Keep in mind they've signed at least 10 guys out of the transfer portal each of the last two off seasons. So if we're just looking at high school guys, I'm going to give them about 5 more spots. I think they add another running back, whether that be Jason Brown Jr. or somebody out of the transfer portal. I think they add at least one more wide receiver. I know they're still involved with Jeremiah McClellan. They're going to keep recruiting him. And maybe Roger Saliapaga, like I mentioned. So I think one more wide receiver of some sort is definitely on the wish list for them. I think they want at least one more offensive lineman, but that's where you kind of get a little bit murky. You got Brandon Baker, who you're still going after. Can they get him back on campus for an official visit? You got to see. Jordan Seaton out of IMG Academy, really, really gifted offensive lineman. And you also have Eddie Pierre-Louis out of Tampa, Florida, an interior guy that maybe could be Oregon's premier option at center, depending on how he stacks up against Devin Brooks, who is also an interior guy that's committed to Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class out of Clackamas. So that's at least 3 guys right there. I think you probably want to get at least one more linebacker. For my money, that's going to be Platt on Monday. So that's up to 4 now. And then maybe you take another corner, Sione Laulea. I don't really know if that's going to happen yet. I haven't put my prediction, but I think that that's someone that Oregon would really like to get. And then I also have to mention one more defensive lineman. Is it Aiden Breland? Is it Jericho Johnson? So 27, 28, that sounds super high. But just with how much we saw the roster turned over this offseason, I bet I would not be surprised if there's a certain number of guys, some recruits in this class where they say, hey, that guy is special. He needs to be in Eugene. Take him and we'll figure out the numbers later. So I don't know who those guys are just yet. Maybe I have an idea in my head, but I'm not going to share that today. So we shall see. But good question. I like that one for sure. Let's see what we got here. All right. Micah Time. What's up, Micah Time? He says, I'm late. Any updates on the running back recruits? I don't think there's anything too new to update, Micah, with the running back recruits here in 2024. I think it's Jason Brown Jr., and if they don't go with him, maybe they go with somebody out of the transfer portal. I think that the transfer portal option kind of seems more likely the more I think about it, just when you look at that room after this year. Let's look at this room, the running back room in 24, assuming Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington are both gone. You have Jordan James coming back as your number 1. Then you have Dante Dowdell and Jaden Lamar, probably both going to redshirt this year. We'll have to see. More confident in Lamar redshirting than Dowdell. And then you also have Dejon Riggs, who comes in as a true freshman. Do you only want one experienced back? I don't know. I feel like you can definitely do yourself a favor by bringing in more experience and production out of the transfer portal. So that kind of makes sense. Or maybe you take Jason Brown Jr. and Dejon Riggs, thinking at least one of those guys can play early. neither of them really stick out to me in that sense, but running back is a position that Carlos Loughlin has been shown to get guys involved early. Looking at Jordan James as our perfect example. So we'll have to see, but that's kind of just my 2 cents today, Friday, September 1st, on the running back recruits. Tony L. Barber with a question. Appreciate the question, Tony. Thanks for being here. Are we going to beat USC in recruiting for 2024? That's a great question. I feel like it's too early to say right now. Here in the 24 cycle, because USC is Oregon's main West Coast recruiting rival, right? We all know that. So Oregon 22 commits, number 13 class in the country. USC 15 commits, number 17 class in the country. I will say, for some thoughts on USC's class, I don't cover USC recruiting, obviously, but being out here in Southern California, I feel like I do get around a lot of these guys. Marcellus Williams at Bosco, Xavier Jordan at Sierra Canyon and Chatsworth, Ryan Pelham at Milliken here in Long Beach. I think that one thing that I've realized with Lincoln Riley and USC, and Lincoln Riley's first recruiting cycle, it really felt like he was kind of just writing off high school, and he was really looking hard at the transfer portal. And that was a clear reason why they were able to play so well last year and turn around so quickly. But now I'm seeing a little bit more of a recruiting emphasis in the high school ranks for Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans. Their class is headlined by Cameron Fountain, 4-star edge rusher out of Booker T. Washington in Atlanta, Georgia. And they even reached out into Florida for Jason Zandamela, interior offensive lineman out of Clearwater Academy International. But I don't know. I think it's too early to say here for Oregon versus USC in 2024, because USC still has a lot of room from a number standpoint and Oregon doesn't. But the guys that Oregon is still going after, I think that those guys are going to carry significant weight in the recruiting rankings, whether it's Jason Brown Jr., like I talked about. He's really highly rated. Braden Platt is really highly rated. Really, really highly rated. You're looking at a guy like Aiden Breland in the 24 class. And I don't know. I don't know if there's enough guys that I see them taking as of right now. As of right now, I would give the edge to USC, even though Oregon has the higher ranking, just because USC has so much more room. And I know that they're still recruiting some pretty high-profile guys. So I'm not confidently saying USC, but just as I break it down right now, I think I'm going to go ahead and give USC the edge there. Let's see. All right, we got Cash Out Win. Everybody hit the like button. The Duck community is growing. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the comment. Exploring with Ben and Sam. Lots of duck emojis. Less than 24 hours till game time. Let's go. Man, I'm getting so excited. I hope I can watch some of the game tomorrow. It's on Pac-12 Network, so we know that's not going to be easy. But if you guys want to subscribe to Fubo or do like a free trial, I think you can catch the game with Fubo. I think they're carrying it. So just a note there. Exploring with Ben and Sam. Hashtag Bodacious. Playboy1625 asks, could 2025 be a big year for the state of Oregon? There could be some big names coming out. Yeah, I think let's look at the state of Oregon in 2025. I think I might already actually have that tab pulled up. Give me a second here. Okay. Well, see, that's the thing. I'm using 247's database as my profile, as my baseline, but I don't see any 2025 Oregon guys that have been offered. So I'm not super sure what they're going to do as far as state of Oregon guys in 2025. I think that Ansu Sanu, he's a 2026 guy out of Lake Ridge High School in Lake Oswego. He's visited Oregon before. He's a top 100 guy that made his debut in the 247 rankings. So I'm not really sure. I need to look a little bit more and see what other names there are in the state of Oregon. But as of right now, I'm not really sure. Andrew with a question. Max, do you think there's any Ducks currently committed that could snag a coveted 5th star by the end of the season? MVB, Michael Van Buren, looked rough game 1, so I don't see that. Not sure who else could pull it off. Yeah, looking at Oregon's commits right now, to get 5-star status, you'd have to make a pretty sizable jump. As of right now, I think that Jaquan McRoy is the best chance at doing that from a ranking standpoint. He's number 58 nationally and number 3 at his position. But even so, that's pretty far out. So I'm just trying to think of who could do that for Oregon that's already committed. I think another part that factors into it is the level of competition that they're playing and the production. I think Dylan Gresham is going to be a pretty big riser for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class. Braden Platt is ranked number 72 nationally, according to the 247 Sports Composite. The top 247. Let me take a look at the 247 Composite and see if that makes it any less of a jump. No, in the 247 Sports Composite, Oregon doesn't even have anybody in the top 60. Or actually, where's McRoy? Come on. Well, I think Jaquan McRoy is probably the best chance. Maybe you got Dakota Fields. He's a top guy for the Ducks, committed out of Gardena Serra, corner, plays some really good competition. Maybe Aaron Flowers out there in the state of Texas. Maybe he could make some noise and make a jump up the rankings. But right now he's outside the top 100, I believe. So it's going to be tough. I don't think that Michael Van Buren's only a 5-star on ESPN. So it's going to be hard. Devi with a question. Explain to me how the rankings work, please. For example, MVB went from 4-star to a 3-star on 247, but ESPN had him as a 5-star. I'll say this with as much respect as I can. I don't really buy into ESPN's rankings. I just don't think that they have as much of a presence as 247, Rivals, and On3. I think all of those outlets have a stronger presence on the ground at high school football games on a weekly basis. ESPN does run the UC report camp in conjunction with Under Armour. So I think they kind of put a lot of stock in their rankings in those camps. I've been to those camps before, but the reason that I tend to defer to 247, Rivals, and On3, a newer outlet, is because they have more of a presence at games on Fridays, which is really when the reps count and when you can get your best look at a guy and project how he's going to transition to the next level. So I can tell you that the composite is the ranking system that takes into account all the major services. So it takes in 247, Rivals, On3, and ESPN. But to me, I personally really don't put a lot of stock in ESPN's rankings. That's why I always defer to 247. Raymond, looking forward to hearing about what is still to come, but it is hard to put the game Saturday in the back of my thoughts. Yeah, we're less than 24 hours away now, folks, so it's going to be super fun. I'm going to have a photographer at the game, so I'm super excited to see how those photos turn out. I'm going to see Dylan Williams tonight in Long Beach Poly versus Mission Viejo. Couple of big-time prospects at Mission Viejo. You have 2025 5-star wide receiver Phillip Bell, who transferred over from Christian Brothers, I want to say it was, in Sacramento, was going to go to Alemany, and then he ended up at Mission Viejo. And then you also have Dijon Lee, who is a huge 6'3" corner. I believe he is the number 1 cornerback in the country for 2025. He also plays at Mission Viejo, so I'm excited to get eyes on him after seeing him take home some awards at the UC report camp in Mission Viejo earlier this spring. All right, I'm almost out of here, guys. Do me a favor. You got to make sure you're following me on the socials at mtorres sports on Twitter, on Instagram. That's the best way to get my updates. Read all of my work over on ducksdigest.com. That's where I have my recruiting updates, my scoop, Torres's take, all that good stuff. And then subscribe to my YouTube channel here at Oregon Football Max Torres. We're trying to just keep running those numbers up and doing the pod 5 days a week. So you guys always have plenty of Duck Talk for you between games. Portland State kick things off tomorrow, and then you got Oregon going into the Lone Star State, Big 12 country, to Lubbock to face former Duck Tyler Shuck. Love saying that. I'm going to say it a million times next week. But before we get out of here, do me a favor and share the podcast with your friends, family, and other Duck fans. It has been awesome having another live mailbag with you guys. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football with me, to talk some Duck Cruton with me. You know I love it. So appreciate the support. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And